Non-monogamy on the whole is more challenging than monogamy because, and it gives more gifts in some ways than monogamy because it shines a light on all our unresolved attachment injuries.
Welcome to Normalizing Non-Monogamy, the podcast where we interview incredible people from across the entire spectrum of non-monogamy to hear their fascinating stories. We strive to bring guests on the show who have a healthy approach to non-monogamy. However, it's important to remember that everyone does it a little bit differently, and the views and opinions expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect our own.
Additionally, we produce this show for entertainment purposes only. Please be aware that we aren't doctors or therapists. Consult a medical professional for anything regarding your health that you might learn about on the show. Enjoy!
Well, welcome to episode 238. We're Finn and Emma, and today we have an amazing conversation with Kate. Kate is a sex-positive therapist and author of a newly released book, Open Deeply, and we have a wide-ranging conversation with her all about her background, exploring swinging and polyamory, and a lot of different stories in this episode.
Yeah, it's a fantastic conversation. And yeah, as Emma said, Kate talks a little bit about the book, but primarily we're focusing on her journey in non-monogamy, which lines up almost perfectly with her time practicing as a psychotherapist. So about 20 years or so of experience in both non-monogamy and being a therapist. So we're super excited about this. Thank you, Kate, for coming on, for sharing your story, and for all the work you do.
Yes, and links, of course, to everything she mentioned will be in the show notes.
Including her book.
Yes. Before we jump into the interview, we do have a couple of announcements. First up, huge thank you to our Patreon community. It keeps growing, and we love all of you in there. If you're out there looking for like-minded individuals, we'd encourage you to check out our Patreon community. We have ongoing chat groups, we have monthly Q&As, and we have men's groups and women's groups. To find out more, go to our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com, and click on the Patreon button.
And what's exciting about today, June 1st,
we have Q&As tonight.
We do. And so today is the perfect day to join. Check it out. It's a couple of bucks a month, and you get the whole month to experience it. And if you don't like it, after the month of June, you can set yourself free for the summer.
Right.
Or the winter if you're in the Southern Hemisphere.
Or you can just stay and find community.
Which is the truest freedom.
Yes. And just a quick note on the Q&As. We have two of them each month, and they're on the same night, one at 9 p.m. Eastern and another one at 8 p.m. Pacific. So depending on your time zone, you can hopefully join one or both.
Yes. The other things we have coming up are some virtual events, actually just one right now on the calendar. This is open to anybody and everybody, but we do a monthly virtual meet and greet. These we've been doing for, I don't know, feels like 100 years, but that's because
2 years.
We started them in the middle of the pandemic. And so the next one is on June 9th. That is a Thursday, and we bring everybody together into a giant Zoom room. We do some introductions, a couple of icebreaker questions, and then we ask more sort of direct pointed questions to help everybody get to know each other. And we answer those in breakout rooms with a handful of people for 5 to 10 minutes. And then we scramble the rooms, ask a new question, and do it again. And
again, these are open to anyone. You just have to be open-minded and respectful. So go to our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com, and click on the community events tab. You'll find all of the information there. We also have exciting news.
Did we tell them how to find the Patreon stuff?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, good.
You just.
I would say you go to normalizingnonmonogamy.com and you click on the Patreon tab.
Yeah, I said that.
I know.
But now they know for sure.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to say it 7 times.
Yes.
For it to sink in.
Yep, that's very true. Maybe we should just sit here and repeat it.
I think we would lose a lot of respect from people.
People would be like, "Come on, let's just forward this." Anyway. We also have an exciting announcement. We were on another podcast that was released this week. So Philip, who was on episode 183 of our podcast, has his own podcast called Dear Polly. And on the May 30th, 2022 episode, he interviewed us. So go check it out. Links are in the show notes. We had a wonderful time talking to Philip. He's an amazing human, and we were excited to have that time with him.
Yeah. It's a great conversation, and I think I will say he posted this on Instagram, and I was listening to the episode this morning, and he talked about it in his intro, how he was actually pretty moved by our conversation and the vulnerability there. And so props to us for being awesome. A huge thank you to him for having us on the show and for asking such amazing questions and for being a space that we feel safe enough to do that in. So thank you, Philip. We're excited, and we're excited to see your podcast still growing.
Yes.
A year after it kind of kicked off.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And with that, let's go talk to Kate.
Almost.
Oh, you got to remind people where to find us.
Let's do that.
Go to our website, normalizingnon-monogamy.com. There you can find a contact us page. Send us an email, send us a voicemail. We'd love to hear from you if you'd want to come on the show, or if you have any feedback or questions for us, we'd love to hear from you.
And you don't have to be an author or a podcaster or anybody in particular to come on the show. Most of our guests are just average Joes and Josephines and
Just.
I didn't say just.
Yes, you did.
Did I? Well, it makes you special.
Anyway, the point is
to be fair.
Oh, no. Don't go down
anybody
that road.
can come on the show, and we would love to have you. Reach out. Let us know what you think, and we hope to hear from you soon. And now,
let's go talk to Kate. Welcome, Kate, to the show. We're excited to talk to you today, and thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. You guys have a great podcast. I love what you're doing. You know, just the concept of normalizing non-monogamy is so needed. I still feel like there's a lot of people that have no idea how many non-monogamous people are out there, because let's face it, not many people are lucky enough to be able to be out, or, you know, there's certain things that keep them having to be closeted. So, letting people know actually, you know, who we are and that this is a significant part of our society is so important.
Yeah. Well, thank you for those kind words as well. We'd love to start by having you introduce yourself. All
right. I'm Kate Loree. I'm Los Angeles psychotherapist. I've been doing psychotherapy for 19 years. I specialize in I'm a sex positive therapist, meaning that I serve people that are non-monogamous and kinky and LGBTQ and sex workers, like porn performers and escorts. I'm also an art therapist, and I'm a trauma therapist. And I just finished a book that just came out called Open Deeply, a guide to building conscious, compassionate, open relationships. And I'm excited to say it's already, in just a few days, it's hit 5th in Kindle's sexuality section, and it's in the top 10 already in Audible in their sexuality section.
Congratulations.
So, yeah. So I'm really excited about both of those things, because I just got started. You know, if it's already that high up on those lists, then goodness knows where it's going to be in a couple of months. So it's really, really exciting. And so far I'm getting a lot of positive feedback. So it's really fun for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that's exciting, and congratulations.
Thank you.
We're excited for you. Do you mind taking us back in time to like working with non-monogamous people? Like how did that come to be, in terms of, was it like you were non-monogamous yourself and then that was the population you wanted to work with? Or was it you started working with this population and then you're like, well, I could do this myself? Like maybe where did the non-monogamous piece first enter your sort of worldview?
Do you mind if I go way before? Do you mind if I go
We don't mind anything.
That?
If it makes sense, you do what makes sense. And
Yeah.
we will happily welcome
and
it.
if along the way I forget the question, you remind me.
We'll bring it back up. But
yes, because I'm going to go way back. Way back. So even though my family are super progressive Canadians, like my grandparents are from Canada, for certain reasons, I ended up in the deep South. I ended up in Alabama in a small town. And in that small town, there was great people, but there was a lot of, sex shaming, certainly a lot of misogyny and racism. And I think a lot of the things that I am today are in reaction to that, you know?
Okay, yeah.
So I'll say that. So, I originally got actually an MBA, took my whole life down. Funnily enough, after watching Fight Club, I realized that I was the Edward Norton character. And I literally I ended 11-year monogamous relationship. I dropped out of my business job. I left Colorado. I packed up my little red Paseo, came out to LA, got a second master's in marriage and family therapy with a focus in art therapy. and got in the second year of coming out to LA, found the person that I was going to be with for 13 years. And that was a non-monogamous relationship and marriage. So I met him in 2003. That's also when I started doing therapy while I was still in the master's program. And so when I started doing therapy is also concurrent with when I started being non-monogamous in my private life. But I wasn't actually working with non-monogamous people until I started my private practice in 2011. So
Okay.
I had been from 2003 to 2011, I was an art therapist and I wasn't working with those populations. But in my private life was this huge continuum. We started out in the swing lifestyle. Later at the end of that relationship, we were poly, and in between we were every hybrid you can think of. So, so at the beginning of my career, I was working in clinics, doing art therapy and all of that. And then I would come home, and later on in our marriage, my now ex-husband, he became a photographer for the lifestyle. And he had a photography company called Dirty Dolly Photography. And he would fly all over the United States, doing photography that they would, that couples, individuals would use on websites.
Okay.
For their profile pictures and all of that. So, so let's see. So going back to your question, you can kind of see what led up to it. When I got to the point where I was going to open my private practice, I had clients before I even had a space. People found out that I was going to open my private practice. I had people calling me up, people in the community, because they wanted to go to a sex positive psychotherapist. So I had to scramble to find a place to see clients. And so my private practice started skyrocketing immediately. And so that's kind of how it happened in terms of answering your question, is that people knew us very well because, again, my ex-husband, we were low key, we were very well known across the United States because of Dirty Dolly. And so people knew us. And so, so when I started my practice in 2011, it built very quickly.
That's amazing. Yeah. Well, congratulations on that. And
thank you.
So did he introduce you to swinging into non-monogamy? Like when you showed up in LA, you were just this innocent Southern belle, and you walked into eyes wide open now.
Okay, so again, let's back up. So when I grew up in Alabama, how should I say? Even back then, I mean, people knew that I was different for many reasons. One, I was born in Oregon. Again, my family is from Canada, so they would jokingly call me a Yankee. I didn't have a thick accent like a lot of people did. I was like the artsy weirdo. I'm 53, so this was back in the 80s when I was in high school. I was, for many reasons. I was a weirdo because I was the physics nerd. I was a weirdo because I was the artsy chick that was friends with all the artists and took all the art classes. And I was a weirdo because I was more openly sexual and not ashamed of that. I got my first book on sexuality when I was 6 years old. It was a book called Where Do You Come From? That was age appropriate that my mom gave me. That was, if you can still Google it. I still have a copy of it. It's like little chubby mom and dad, chubby couple that are very much in love, and it's all cartoons, and it describes sex as being tickled with a feather. That was it's very cute. And then my mom gave me age appropriate books as I grew up. So by the time I was in the 5th grade in elementary school, I was the resident Dr. Ruth at the lunchroom table.
Right. You knew all the things.
Yeah. And so by the time I was in high school, and I was, again, in the small town, we didn't have punk rockers or goth kids in the town, so the wildest you got was being a metalhead. And this was during the time of, Ozzy and Motley Crue and, all of these kind of bands. And so I had the black makeup that went down like this, and, and all of that. So by LA standards, I probably would have just been popular, but in in the town that I grew up in, I was considered very wild, and again, there's a lot of sexual shame there. So it's not like I was this quintessential Southern belle by any means, but I had just ended an 11-year monogamous relationship very shortly after meeting Richard. And, it started out with Richard with us just kind of joking around. We were both very sexual people and not scared to talk about sex. And so we joke around about, a once a year hall pass with like who would be your celebrity of choice, Angelina Jolie or, something like that. And in my mind, we were just joking. But now I can look back on it and see that it all led up to the day that I came home from work. And at the time I was in graduate school. I had 3 different jobs because I was, had to support myself. And I came home to our little bungalow apartment guest house that was behind a main house, walked in the door, and he was seated in front of the computer screen. On the computer screen was a woman with her legs spread, provocatively posed, with her pussy displayed, smiling out at me, and he's smiling out at me. And I was just like, I was really nervous because even then I could tell he's always been the kind of man that can make things that seem impossible happen. So when he proposes something, you take it seriously. And he said to me, I have an idea, a big one. And I was immediately nervous. And he had been talking to sex educator Sadie Allison and saying to her, I've always cheated on women. I really love her. I don't want to cheat on her again. And she said, why don't you guys try swinging? And so he proposed that to me. Now, this is back in 2003. I didn't even know about the ethical slut. I did not know about Janet Hardy. And in my mind, immediately I had like this orange, like it was very clear in my head, like an orange van with green shag carpet with this lascivious man, like luring me inside and his downtrodden wife in the back. And he has the gold chain and he's like, come in, little girl. Like this is what immediately was in my head. And I immediately launched in going, this is going to ruin my career. My mom's going to find out. Other therapists are going to find out. What are you talking about? And then he was just very kind and he was just like, Kate, and he started explaining it to me and started to take down some of the things I had in my head. And he's just like, this is where we were at the time. He's just like, you are my priority. We're not going to do anything you don't want to do. Why don't we just explore? Why don't we just go to dinner with a few couples and just have a conversation and just see where it goes? And so that's kind of where it started, was from that place. But I was definitely the nervous one in all of that.
Yeah.
How long had you two been together when you walked into the apartment that day?
Like 3 months.
3 months? Wow.
Wow. It was a whirlwind.
But I mean, I will say, like, good for him on the like self-awareness of like, I always cheat on my partners. I don't want to do that this time. How do I do it differently? And we could argue all day whether the delivery was right or not, but like, at least there was the like self-awareness to say like, I don't want to do it that way. Like, there's got to be a better way or a different way. Like, let's try a different way. So I give a lot of credit for that.
Yeah. I mean, he's a man of extremes. We're not together now. But we're still friends and there's a lot of blessings that came out of that relationship. He could always, on a side note, he could always see things in me before I could. He's definitely a male muse. And there's a lot of things that I have accomplished in life, partially because he kind of just said he could just see those things. He's like, I can see these things happening for you, Kate. And it just kind of helped me see things that maybe I wouldn't have thought of.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you went down the swinging path, how did that go?
So, the first year we were on Adult Friend Finder. And I haven't been on that site in years, but at that time in 2003, it was not working for me at all. Yeah. And we'd go out with couples and they were just not right. And I finally said to him, I said, Richard, I I believe if we go to a party, I can change things for us. If you can just have us go to a in-person party. And he's like, why would that be any different? And I'm just like, let's just try it. And he's like, okay. So we go to this party, and it's in the Valley out here in Los Angeles. And it's like a little dive bar, but it's been taken over by non-monogamous people. And it's a year later, but I still have a lot of my little stereotypes in my head. I'm still not convinced that I needed to take those stereotypes down. But as soon as I walked into that bar, I saw just this the women looked super empowered. They were beautiful. They were in beautiful dresses. They were super extroverted, and they were having a great time. The guys were well dressed, but kind of seated back and just being very respectful and nice. But definitely the women were like the butterflies in the room for sure at this particular party. And I immediately started to feel better. So we were just like hanging out and everything. And Richard said to me, he goes, you see that couple over there? And there was this couple, they were just phenomenal. That they just real high energy, beautiful couple. He's like, that's the kind of couple that I wish we could have in our life and be friends with and all the things. And so then he went to the bathroom. And while he was in the bathroom, I went up to her. She was dancing by herself around a pole, and I just started dancing with her around the pole. So when he came out, I was dancing with her. He was like, what? And then Richard and Richard had this dorky joke that it was an ongoing joke. If he saw someone in Los Angeles that looked like a celebrity, but it clearly wasn't, he'd be like, oh, look at that guy. It's Robert Downey Jr. or something like that. It was just this dumb thing that he did. So that couple invited us back to a hotel that they had. They got a hotel because they had kids back home and they just wanted a private space. And so we get in the car to follow them to the house, to the hotel room. And Richard says, and I'm not going to reveal this celebrity's name. I'm just going to call him Batman.
Okay.
We're about to drive to the hotel room, and he's like, Kate, we're going home with Batman. And I looked at him and I go, that is Batman. He's like, what? And I said, did you notice? Now, in this back in 2003, especially in the swing lifestyle, it can be pretty heteronormative. And Batman, all these men were buying him drinks. And I said to Richard, I'm like, at this particular party, men would not be buying him drinks if it wasn't Batman. He's like, oh shit, we're going home with Batman. And I'm like, yes, we are. And so at that point, everything changed because we did end up becoming friends with them. And that couple steered us to a much better website. Now that website is not as great because it hasn't kept up with the times. But at the time, there was a lot of like celebrities that were they wouldn't reveal themselves, but they were on that website with in incognito mode. And it was a great website with like amazing couples that were charming and wonderful. And from that point on, everything just started to build where we just kind of got into these inner worlds. Because as you know, with non-monogamy, it's a bit like a secret society. You get to know one person that you feel is your tribe, and then they invite you here. And then you're slowly going inner, and then you're getting invited to these epic parties and things like that. And so they were the beginning of that.
Was that your first, like you had been on Adult Friend Finder trying to meet people, maybe going on dates. Was the Batman experience your first like time swapping or doing anything with another couple? Like, was that your first experience?
How do you know that somebody is a slut when they can't remember? I literally cannot remember. I mean, we did seal the deal with them that night. But I honestly, I can tell you that before that night, there was times that we kind of made out with folks and maybe there was nothing that was memorable.
We'll say that's the memorable first,
right?
First memorable experience. And so maybe going into that, like, was there fear? What were your feelings? Going into that, like that car ride back to the hotel, was it just pure excitement, or were there like a mix of other emotions?
Well, because you said you started feeling better the minute you got to that party. So did that continue?
I think, I felt better when I was at the party, but on that ride there, I was a little bit, how should I put it? I felt more in my power than I ever had. I'm like, see, this is what I can pull off. If just give me the reins a little bit and I will pull off some magic, And so I was a little bit, feeling like a fancy pants, a little, when your head kind of goes like this and expands. I was a little full of myself, I think, proud of myself on that ride to the hotel room. But yeah, things just progressively changed for us from that point on. And I definitely felt better. As you know, with non-monogamy, it's a journey. And there was a lot of highs and lows. We were great adventure buddies, but there was a lot of pain too.
Sure.
It was all the things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so what did the journey, the transition, like you said, it took every form from swinging to polyamory and every form in between. Like, so you wake up the next morning having gotten your bat fuck on, like what happens, what happens after that?
The very next day after that particular time,
or just moving forward.
Moving forward.
You wake up and where does the journey take you?
If you're asking about the very next day,
I took it a little too literal. I'm sorry. That's on me. That's on me.
Dig back to the deep.
At 7:30 in the morning, what happened?
So that was when, in my mind, the chapter that had to do with the swing lifestyle really started to take off. Eventually, we became kind of the general pattern of swingers. Like, we were very, very much control freaks. We would usually, if we played, it was at our house. We would handpick people. We would scour the website and handpick people and like invite, in the beginning, about 20, 30 people to our home. And then we certainly didn't play with all those, just for any monogamous people. Monogamous people have a tendency to think it's this big free for all, which actually non-monogamous people tend to be, in my experience, way more picky and selective than monogamous people, because we just have access to this amazing world and we can very much hand select. So we would hand select about 20, 30 people. The amount of people that we actually played with in our bedroom was, five people, 6 people or whatever that we would bring to the back, maybe sometimes just one person, and that's what we did. A lot of times, sometimes we had a party about like once a month, and towards the end of doing parties, there was one party that was 80 people. That got a little bit crazy. I find that when it's like 30, 40, that's like a sweet spot. When it got to be 80, people quit kind of minding themselves as much. And the sweet spot was when we had the parties that were 20 to 40 people. And like I said, we were doing that like once a month for a long time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so how did the transition to polyamory start or come into your life?
So as I said, Richard is a different kind of human. So he just comes up with shit sometimes. And one day he said he knew he had to change his career, and he had been an artist. There is art that he did when he was 6 that were amazing. Like, he's a very gifted artist, and he's had to reinvent himself a bazillion times over the course of his life. And this was a time where he needed to reinvent himself drastically. And I came home one day and he said, I know what I'm going to do next. And he's like, I'm going to start Dirty Dolly photography. I'm going to be gone every month. My makeup artist, I'm going to change her name, is Donna. She's going to be my girlfriend and my makeup artist. I'm going to be gone like half the year, probably doing shoots. Swing lifestyle is probably not going to work for us anymore in the same way. We need to be poly. Why don't you date Donna's boyfriend? He's this gorgeous architect, and I was just kind of like, what? It was my turn to be blown away. And at first I was just like, what are you talking about? I like to play together. I don't want to change things. And But again, it was one of those things that I knew he was going to do Dirty Dolly. Donna was one of the best makeup artists out there. In the lifestyle, she had the reputation of being one of the biggest sweethearts nationally. Like, she was nationally known as this huge sweetheart. Like, people knew her. And so even though that was a really hard time for me, I knew this was good for him. And so I went with it, but I'll have to say that during that beginning time, there was a lot of fights and a lot of discord until we found our groove. And then I eventually, really did find my groove and enjoyed it. He jumped into full on poly way faster than me. I had a tendency to pick really gorgeous lovers that were great at sex, but that I knew I wouldn't fall in love with. It wasn't until way longer in the future that I ended up being full tilt poly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what were some of the initial friction points that you hit? You said he kind of jumped in and there was some conflict and discord. What were maybe the sources of that? And then how did you work through those to get to a place where you found the groove?
Yeah, I have to be careful for a couple of reasons because he has a whole new life with his new wife. I don't want to throw him under the bus in any way. And and also since I'm a psychotherapist, I don't tend to reveal a whole bunch. So let's see what comes out of my mouth. I would just say that in general, Richard was the one who wanted to go faster. He's the one who liked change. He wanted just a faster and more and quick, and for me, I think I like a more gentle pace within non-monogamy. Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot of problems just in terms of that, in terms of the speed and the quantity that he was always wanting.
Yeah.
And but I don't regret anything. And in fact, I think a lot of the book that I wrote, Open Deeply, I wouldn't have been able to write if it wasn't for the fact that I did have such highs and lows. I had all these amazing experiences, but I also had a good deal of pain that later on when I started my practice and people started showing up with the exact damn thing, people started showing up with the exact same problems. I already knew kind of how to help them work through it. Yeah. When I went into my practice, it actually gave me a lot more compassion for Richard, because I was like, oh, this isn't just him that's being really challenging. This is what pretty much all couples are bringing into therapy. And so I had a lot more compassion after seeing that.
Yeah, I was going to say that that concept of, I think just the idea that two people get into something like this and go at the same speed is, I think, a rare thing. I think that it's very common to have the gas brake analogy is a pretty ubiquitous one of someone's kind of driving it forward and somebody's sort of being the checks and balances. And I think that is healthy, but also can create the discord that sounds like you've come up against. And I know we've talked to many people who have come up against that same exact thing. And it's fun to see then it can flip. And all of a sudden the gas is now the brake and the brake is jamming on the gas pedal. And then that messes with people's sort of perception of everything as well. So
yeah. And that did happen with us. I mean, down the road, there was towards the end when we were heading towards a divorce, there was a point where he was like, let's not be poly anymore. Let's just focus on each other. And I was like, nope. And he was just he was blown away. But that's the thing. Mm-hmm. And I always talk to people about that. It's as soon as you play separately, you are opening the door to love in a way that you aren't when you just do the swing lifestyle. And other people are involved, and now feelings are involved, and you can't just back the truck up once you do that. Mm-hmm. So I always just say, it's gonna, if you decide to be poly or play separately, it's going to bring a lot of joys, but be careful and really think it through, because there's a lot of things that you cannot back the truck up from.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah. It's going to very likely drastically change your relationship.
Yes.
Yeah.
And maybe really good ways, but also maybe challenging ways.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, non-monogamy on the whole is more challenging than monogamy because, and it gives more gifts in some ways than monogamy because it shines a light on all our unresolved attachment injuries. And if you are blessed with that, elusive, secure childhood where your parents were always there for you and everyone had your back. And so then you go into non-monogamy feeling that people will have your back and that it will be okay. That's great. But for a lot of us, we have an insecure attachment styles. We've had bad things happen in our backstory, like, our dad leaving when we're little or what have you. And we bring that into non-monogamy, right? Like those unresolved attachment injuries, and then they play out in our relationships, and again, that's one of the main things I talk about in my book. It's like, that's not going to stop somebody from being non-monogamous. Just like an artist, with an artist, even if they're depressed, that doesn't stop them from being an artist. An artist doesn't say, I'm going to be an accountant instead because I had a traumatic childhood or I struggle with depression. No, they decide to be an artist anyway. And then they figure out how to deal. Same thing with non-monogamy. For a lot of people, it's leans towards or is an orientation. And so despite having a bad, hard backstory or struggling with depression or what have you, they will still choose it. And so that's one thing I talk about plainly in my book is, okay, how do we manage non-monogamy if we concurrently have these things going on? And, we all experience it, how our unresolved injuries light up in our non-monogamous relationship when we have to figure out how to cope with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all of that. I was curious, how has your journey with non-monogamy gone since that relationship with Richard ended?
Well, let me just say at the end of that relationship in 2016, so I asked for a divorce in 2015, October 2015. He didn't move out until 2016. I moved my boyfriend 2 years in, so I just got switched out men. But then I ended up ending that relationship in August. So in May, I moved him in. August, I broke up with him. So I had like a double breakup in 2016, which actually was there was a lot of good things about that because previously I had not been able to write the book. I had the book in my head for 3 years. A little bit after that, I hired Jordan Woolen, a hypnotist, and I started writing the book the day after she hypnotized me the very first time. And then I just never stopped writing. It took me 5 years to finish the book. And honestly, like downscaling my life is what I had to have in order to do such a massive project because the book is not simple. I was still a dating cat lady during that time. But before I started writing that book, I was going to all the parties, like a lot of kinky parties, like all kinds of different parties. And in order to write
by yourself.
Well, in the last 2 years, mostly with, the boyfriend that I had for the last 2 years.
Oh, right.
He was, both of us were kind of switchy and he was kinky. And so we kind of did a deep dive those 2 years more in the kink non-monogamous scene. By that point, I've never really played at other people's parties. If I have done anything, it's in my own home. And certainly once I opened my practice, that no longer was a choice, but a necessity because I got to the point that even when I went to other states, I would run into a client. Like I remember one year, oh gosh, when was it? I think it was 2017. I went to Vegas to see AVN and I went with a girlfriend and one of my other girlfriends, Hudzi Han, she was, now she's kind of mostly retired, a pretty famous pro-dom. She was throwing a party that night and I'm like, oh, I can be free and just do things. Literally within an hour, one of my clients walked in and and I had to leave. So, this is a good problem to have. I'm not complaining. I love my career. I love my clients. I feel very blessed. But, one of the downsides is I can be in a space where clients are, but as soon as it feels like it's ramping up into anything like play, I have to leave, you know?
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah. No, that makes complete sense. And so you did the book, and that was your life.
That was her relationship.
Right.
She was in a relationship with the book for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have had relationships. I dated a war photojournalist. He was a guy that lived in the Middle East. He would run towards the bomb to get the shot. I dated, he came to LA to get away from that because he felt like he was going to get killed otherwise. I dated a guy who used to be a Ford model from Ghana that was fascinating, super smart guy. Dated a British music composer, and in between all of that had a little non-monogamous fun. But I have been very much on the down low in order to make this happen. And now that the book is published and I'm ramping up into being extroverted again and going on podcasts and all that, I'm really looking forward to the next chapter in my life. That can be more adventurous. I want to travel. I want to go to Africa and Costa Rica. I'm very much different than I used to be. I'm way more spiritual, way more into social justice because the spiritual piece, I had cancer a few years. Like while I was writing the book, I had cancer briefly, wrote through that. But during having cancer, I really did a spiritual deep dive to cope with that. And that really changed me in a positive way, I feel. So, I'm very interested in social justice pursuits and things that are connected to my spirituality. So I'm not sure how adventure will show up in the future. I still regard myself as non-monogamous, but in terms of finding partners, I don't lead with that. I lead with like finding a like-minded partner that really wants to make the world better, that really the kind of person that on their dating profile, they're like Black Lives Matter and I'm a feminist and, is listing all those things before they even say, oh, by the way, I'm kinky and this and that. And that's rare. Like, unfortunately on field, people still, all they do is like list their interests usually. And I'm just like, that's great, but that's not what I lead with, So
right. Yeah. And so and that was going to be my next question, and you kind of started to answer of where do you see your life going, in your relationships going? And it sounds like very much adventure, open to anything, wanting to be more, intentional about this chapter of your life.
Yeah. Well, there's times. Like I said, I am pretty spiritual. I'm very science-based for sure, but I also am very spiritual. And, Henry Rollins, if you know Henry Rollins, he talks about breathe in years and breathe out years. He's an old, do you guys know who he is?
No.
Anyway, he's a musician. He has been part of Lollapalooza and all of that back in the day.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
But he talks, when he talks about his creative journey, he talks about breathe in years where you're just breathing in like the culture and everything that's going on. And then the breathe out years where you create some kind of artistic project. And I feel like I'm very much like that across my life. And so, this is definitely a time where I'm switching gears in terms of that. And then also, with the book, the universe has never been louder in my life than it was about writing this book. I don't know why. I don't know if there's just one person out there that's supposed to read it and it's going to change something significant, or I don't know what that means. All I know is and I could talk about that more, but the universe was super loud about this. And so I did it. I wrote the book. Now that it's done, I'm kind of in a phase of putting my ear to the ground again and kind of listening to the universe and saying, okay, so what's next? So I don't entirely know what's next. I know I want to go to Africa. I know that I'm looking for a next level lover. And when I say that, I'm not necessarily talking about skill or what have you, although that's good too. I'm talking about, I'm really looking for someone who can attune with me, mind, body, and spirit in a very next level way. And again, somebody who is really devoting their life either on or off the clock to making this world better somehow. And that is part of their juice and their passion. And that's what they want to talk about. And we connect from that place. And that's hard to find. So I'm being very slow. I've been blessed with a ton of beautiful lovers, male and female, beautiful inside and out. And so I am not rushed about this.
Yeah. The bar is set high, right? And you don't have to settle, I think is important. And I think too, when we first started, and I think this is something we've heard from other people, like there's this scarcity mindset a lot of the time because this idea of non-monogamy or swinging is so counter to what we're taught that for us, the mindset was often like, okay, well, we can go out on this date, but then like something has to happen because what if this is the last time? And then as you go through those reps, you're like, this isn't the last time. We don't have to do anything with anybody that we don't like. We can just go home and have a great night. And like, this isn't our last time. There will be the next time.
Yeah.
But when you're first doing it, it's so easy to feel like there's no way this could ever happen again. Like I finally convinced my partner or whatever it is to go out on this date. And now like I have to make something happen versus like, no, let's do things that just feel good because there are opportunities. And actually there's a less likelihood that there are more opportunities if it goes poorly, because then you're going to be afraid to do it again. So it's almost counterintuitive to the way that it really works. But that was our experience.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I've found that a lot. So although I identify as omnisexual, I tend to date men and like women, etc. They're beautiful. I love to make out with them, that sort of thing. But I tend to date men and I tend to choose kind of like an anchor person. And then between the two of us, our non-monogamy blossoms from there. Mm-hmm. And I find that, with men, especially being 53, like if I skew downward, which I usually do, just because a lot of times I've dated men as early as young as 16 years younger than me. And the reason is they tend to be more open-minded. Men that are about 53 tend to be more controlling, like whether they're monogamous or non-monogamous, if they're monogamous, inherently that's a controlling model. But within non-monogamy, you can be controlling too. And it's exactly what you were just saying. Like when you're being pressury, like, let's do the next thing. We got to strike when the iron's hot, blah, blah, blah. That can come off just as controlling as a monogamous man that's trying to put you in a little box. Mm-hmm. And so that's like a primary thing for me personally that I'm looking for is someone who is not trying to control me. If somebody were to say, we must be non-monogamous, or we must be non-monogamous, or we must be monogamous and be in a little box, or we must be non-monogamous and going all to the parties, I wouldn't want to date either man. I'm looking for that person that's more relaxed in their body and just and is putting me as primary above non-monogamy or any kind of relationship model, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it makes total sense.
Yeah. You seem to be pretty open about who you are now and your journey. How, back when you started swinging in non-monogamy itself, what was the journey around telling people in your lives that was your relationship choice?
Yeah, that was a whole journey. It started, obviously people in the lifestyle knew, but the first person that I came out to was my therapist, which is interesting. As you may know, there's a lot of conservative therapists. There's a lot of therapists that are bigoted towards non-monogamy. When I was in my master's program, and I love the master's program that I went to, it was a blessing, 99.5% massive blessing. But if I were to have a beef with them, it would be the fact that in the vignettes, they would say something like, Sally has slept with 2 people. Sally is promiscuous. And I'd be like, well, I guess I can't be honest with my program about who I am. Right. Anyway. And so it took me a while to tell my therapist during the time. When you're in school to be a therapist, you have to have a therapist. That's part of the deal, at least with the program I was in. When I told her, it felt like taking a big grapefruit out of my body, it would, because she reacted so favorably, and I was scared that not only she would judge me, but she would question me as a therapist, as a future therapist. And so for her not to be judgy meant the world to me, enough that I list her in my acknowledgments in my book. And then the second two people I came out to were two psychotherapists that I work with at the clinic before I had my private practice. Again, massive big deal. I'm telling two therapists, they could start to think of me poorly as a fellow therapist. It could damage my career if they decided that they thought I was incompetent and spread word through the clinic. It could mean that I'd get fired or something. But that's not how it went down. They responded super favorably and they were wonderful. And honestly, every time that I've come out, it's been wonderful like that. The last time I came out was just back in December. Because I was almost completely out, but I had not told my mother. And the reason I hadn't told my mom is, she's 82. And I was worried that it might damage her health in some way. I was, that it would be emotionally too hard for her, that there's no way she could understand it. And, it was Christmas time. I was at the dinner table and my friend Hudzy called and I was on the phone. And when I'm back home, I always have her on speakerphone. And so I just unconsciously just put her on speakerphone, but I didn't tell her that she was on speakerphone. And part of the reason I did that was because my mom loves Hudzy because Hudzy was really there for me when I had cancer. So they love each other. And so I was just kind of letting my mom share the experience, but I didn't tell her. And so Hudzy said, "Oh, are you having fun telling your mom about the book?" And my mom didn't even know about the book because she didn't know I was non-monogamous. And my face just dropped and I was just like, and I looked at her and my mom and I just got up and I went to the bed. I just freaked out. I went to the back bedroom and I just shut the door. And while I was walking away, my mom goes, "I heard that."
Say, well, I'm going to have fun telling her about the book now. Thank you.
At first I was almost mad at her, and then I realized it was completely, on me. And I think unconsciously I did it on purpose because literally in my book, there's a place that I say right now I'm 99% out. And by the time this book comes out, I'll be 100% out. So I think subconsciously I did that on purpose. And I let Hudzy know that, it wasn't your fault. That's all on me. And it ended up being a great thing. And my mom's been super supportive and she's been wonderful. And so I've been really blessed that my whole coming out, journey has been, healing and wonderful, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And I'm so glad to hear that because you never know. You never know. And people have their reservations and concerns for different reasons. And I don't blame anybody for being as open or as not open as they choose that's best for them right now.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad that you've had an amazing and supportive experience with that.
Yeah. I mean, so many people don't have that luxury. And I realize that that's a massive privilege to even just come out, let alone the positive responses that I've had.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I had a question going kind of way back in our conversation here. And you had said not that far back, but when Richard, you had asked for a divorce and Richard sort of was like, let's just close our relationship. Let's work on us. Let's do this. And you were sort of like, no, like the toothpaste is out of the tube, right? We're not going back. And I think I wanted to just understand that a little bit because I think that's an interesting tipping point to say, like, because you could have easily said, yep, you're right. Let's close this down. Let's work on our relationship. Let's do that. But for you, it sounds like there was something about non-monogamy that was pulling you in that direction and you weren't going back to monogamy. And I guess, can you talk a little bit about, like, for you, what that drive is, what that pull is that keeps you, even that puts you in a position of like, I'm not going to close down our relationship even to save a marriage.
Yeah. Well, just to clarify, that moment at the restaurant where he said, let's close down let's just work on us. And the day that I asked for a divorce were not the same day. Like they were spread out by at least a year.
Okay.
At that time when he said that, there was a lot of different things that had gone on in our relationship that had nothing to do with non-monogamy. The reason that we got divorce was not because of non-monogamy or anything to do with the relationship model.
Sure. I will just jump in and say, I appreciate you saying that, because I didn't mean for it to seem from my end like I was assuming it was. I think that is an assumption that many people do make. And I'm glad that you highlighted that was not the case. So thank you.
Yeah. I mean, that relationship, it was a 13-year relationship. And again, no regrets. It really shaped me in a lot of ways. Even the good, the bad, the whole thing shaped me in a lot of ways that needed to happen. So, to get me to where I am right now. The reason that we ended the relationship did not have to do with non-monogamy.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
And the draw for you, that I guess maybe what is it that you get out of non-monogamy that just sort of lights you up and drives you towards it?
Well, I think that answer would be different across my life. Mm-hmm. But I will say just in general, because I'm blessed enough to see the underbelly of people's experiences in my private practice. One thing that you'll see when people decide to be non-monogamous is they start to open up like a flower in ways that are completely unrelated to non-monogamy. All of a sudden, they're taking this art class that they had been putting off for 10 years. They're making friends when they've been kind of isolated previously, like all this blossoming process happens that a lot of times just does not happen with monogamy. I know that in my 11-year monogamous relationship previous to that, it was a bit like a cryogenic state in comparison. So I think that's one thing that I like about non-monogamy is, to me, it operates from a sixth love language. You're probably familiar with the 5 love languages. To me, that love language is carefree, fun, freedom, and adventure. And from that place of just a basic cornerstone of growth and change and freedom, all these beautiful things oftentimes can happen for a person. Mm-hmm. So, at this point, I would more identify with as perhaps fluid, and I define it a little bit differently than what the Google search will say, which is just that I allow myself to shift and change on the whole continuum from monogamy to non-monogamy, however it suits me for any particular time. And I expect to surround myself with partners that allow me to shift and change, with making sure that we meet the needs of all parties involved, Mm-hmm. I like that freedom. I like the ability to move towards my human potential across the board.
Yeah. I love that. And I think for me, it makes perfect sense. And we actually had a guest on not that long ago, Evita, and she made the comment that for her, the draw to non-monogamy is absolute freedom in her life to live her life the way she wants. And maybe that means being in a monogamous relationship, but it also means the freedom to not be, if that's what suits. And so I think that really resonated, and it resonated here as you said it as well. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've mentioned the book quite a few times, and I'm so excited to read it, by the way, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit more about that and where people can find it. And I guess, just giving you an opportunity, a platform to pitch your book.
Alrighty. So, the book is doing really, really well. You can purchase it wherever books are sold. I would encourage anybody who likes to have a physical book to buy it from an independent bookstore. Let's support independent bookstores. I know Amazon is easier, but like out here in Los Angeles, you've got Skylight Books, you've got The Last Bookstore, you got Book Soup. Let's support them. It's available on Kindle, audiobook, and paperback. Kindle has already hit the top 5. The audiobook has already hit the top 10 in sexuality. The book, so basically, once I started my private practice, I started seeing couples. And when I started seeing couples, I went to all the the seminars. I've seen Esther Perel speak many times. I've seen the Gottmans. Like I read all of their books. I learned about everything that the main relationship therapists globally had to say. Concurrently, in another track, I'd been learning about trauma. Now you might think, what does trauma have to do with non-monogamy? So bear with me.
We don't think that at all, but carry
go
on.
ahead.
So, the thing that's crazy to me is that couples therapy and trauma therapy tend to run on separate parallel tracks. To me, that's crazy. It doesn't make any sense. So trauma therapy is more like learning somatic psychotherapy and EMDR and mindfulness and body tracking and meditation. That's all the realm of trauma therapy, right? When I started working with couples, I started to realize that the thing that gets in the way of intimacy between any couple is unresolved trauma. And I started to notice, I'm kind of going a little bit away from the book for a moment, but it is in the book. I started to notice that the moment that a couple is at their worst is what I have coined the term double trigger. It's the moment where both of them are triggered simultaneously. And I can give you an example. Is it okay for me to be a little long-winded?
Of course.
Okay. So imagine there's a couple, and Sue in her childhood, she had a dad that was an addict, and her mom, when she was a teenager, really encouraged her to take care of dad. And she grew to really resent dad, because, for obvious reasons. And Sue is dating Bob, and Bob in his childhood, he was bullied a lot. And so if somebody has raises their voice or has a tone or gets big in their body language, he unconsciously has a tendency to cower, which is a trigger for her. So when they get into a fight and she starts to get big because she's just upset or what have you, and he starts to cower, she gets pissed because it reminds her of her dad. And she says things like, why are you cowering? She starts to say cruel things, which makes him cower more, which makes her get even bigger. And you can see how this spirals. Now, this is just an example, but every couple has a double trigger moment. Some of them have many, and some of them are worse than other couples. And so what I figured out is to look for the double trigger, find it, and then I would do separate sessions and do EMDR, which is a trauma modality, with them on the two double triggers. And I've been able to save marriages that way, because once you do EMDR on the two triggers, now you have decreased the charge of those triggers significantly. Sometimes you can clear it entirely or bring it down to a large degree. So the next time that conversation happens, it's similar. All of a sudden they can move through it easily, So
And
anyway,
what does EMDR stand for? Just for anybody who's listening.
Well, it's going to confuse you more, but it's eye movement desensitization reprocessing. So let me just say that one more time. Eye movement desensitization reprocessing. So, but what it is, it's a trauma modality, and it would take me like 25 minutes to really explain it to you.
Yep.
But let me just say this, that it's like Excalibur's sword for therapists. You just need to be a good enough therapist to use it. And it's light years more powerful than talk therapy. If somebody has trauma, I would tell anybody with trauma, don't waste your time with talk therapy. Find a good EMDR therapist, ideally that also knows somatic psychotherapy, because they can dovetail those two things. And that's super powerful if you can, if you can afford it. If you can't afford it, there's other options. And that's one reason I wrote the book, is to give people other options to manage their trauma. So anyway, going back to the book, I know you just wanted me to nutshell the book, but so the book talks about all the things. It's very comprehensive. At the beginning, 3 chapters are just the basics. I kind of power through the basics really quickly. And then part 2 is all about the things that I have not seen in my private practice. People come into my private practice. They've already read The Ethical Slut. They've already read Opening Up, they're a month into their non-monogamous relationship and they feel lost and they don't know where to go. And so this book tackles all the things that show up in my private practice. It talks about, if you're depressed and you're non-monogamous, what do you do? If you're dating somebody with a personality disorder like narcissism, what do you do? It talks about a communication model that's way more powerful than some of the other communication models. There's great communication models out there like the Imago dialogue and nonviolent communication, but none of them say, oh, by the way, none of this will work at all if you're dysregulated in your body. So I talk about my communication model is called EPIC. The E is emotional, F is physical. The physical part has to do with grounding before, during, and after any kind of hard conversation. The I is intellectual. The C is compassion and action. And I take you through all of that. That is so important in non-monogamous relationships because, again, our unresolved trauma gets triggered a lot more than in a monogamous relationship. So we need a communication model that helps us stay grounded all the way through if we're talking about something that is maybe low key triggering some stuff from our backstory. Mm-hmm. So those are a few things the book talks about, and it's way more than that.
Yeah. That's amazing. And thank you for all of the amazing work that you have done and all of the work that went into that book. 5 years of your life and it's incredible. So I appreciate the deep dive, somewhat deep dive into long-winded response.
Yeah. And I apologize for that. It's honestly hard to nutshell this book because it's just so comprehensive.
Yeah, no, I like the long-windedness, so you're totally fine. I think
you don't tell me that when I get talking.
Yeah,
because 7 hours is a little long to monologue. All
exactly.
Right.
But when you hear me say all that, you might think that it's a heavy read, and everybody who's given me feedback, they're like, I can't stop reading this book, and it's fun to read. And so I actually tried to make it as enjoyable as possible, and it's filled with vignettes that illustrate situations. And even though it talks about serious stuff, it's also fun to read.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you.
And links will be in the show notes if anyone wants to go find it.
Right. And so with that, is there anything we haven't talked about, asked you about that you want to make sure that you share, get out into the world before we let you get along with your afternoon today?
Yeah, I would just say to anyone listening out there that you deserve to be loved well. You deserve to be authentic. You deserve to be able to speak your truth. You deserve to be able to make sure that your yes is a true yes. And and that's why I tried to create a book that would help people on their non-monogamous journey figure out how to do that. This world will try and shut you down. There's so much sexual shame in this world. The more you can shed your sexual shame, the more you will blossom like a beautiful flower. And I invite you to do so.
Love it.
Yeah. Wonderful. Beautiful.
Well, thank you, Kate, for taking the time to talk to us today, for writing your book and for sharing everything you did about your journey and where people can find ways to get more help. So thank you. And I guess have a fantastic afternoon.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on. And I love your podcast. You guys are doing great work. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, we appreciate that.
And we're back. A huge thank you to Kate for coming on the podcast and for sharing your story and for all of the amazing work that you do. And of course, your new book. Go check it out. It's called Open Deeply. Links are in the show notes.
Yes. Thank you, Kate. We're super excited. And congratulations on the book. We have a few more things we wanted to remind you of here in the outro. The first is, again, we have Patreon call coming up tonight, June 1st. So if you've been craving that community, tonight's the perfect night to check it out. We have calls tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern and again at 8 p.m. Pacific. So 2 opportunities tonight to join us.
And if you're like, dang it, I missed the calls on June 1st, don't worry, we'll have calls again in July, so you can join us then.
You can. Or you can listen to the recordings.
That's true. In the meantime, you can listen to the recordings if you become a Patreon member. And we have ongoing Mimi chats. We have men's groups and women's groups. So there's lots over there to join. Also, for our outside of Patreon, so these are open to anyone, we have virtual meet and greets. And our next virtual meet and greet, as we talked about in the intro, is next week, June 9th. It's a Thursday night. Come join us. We would love to have you and learn more about you. So come join us, and more information on our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com. How fast can I say that? Go to the community events tab.
And the last thing we wanted to tell you all about is our favorite resource for getting tested for STIs. That is stdcheck.com. With the links in the show notes, you save $10, which brings the cost down to $130.
I thought you were going to quiz me again. It's $130.
Well, it's actually $129.
Okay, you're right.
But
yes.
I've been saying $130, so you get credit for that answer anyway.
Yeah, okay.
And besides you saving $10, it helps support the show financially. So we have a great deal of gratitude to you for doing that. So thank you. STD check is super fast, it is super easy, and it is discreet. It is, again, the way Emma and I get tested for STIs. You sign up online. They basically send all of your information straight to the lab of your choice, basically anyone in the country, the lab, Corp, or Quest, and you show up, you just give them the blood, and away you go in like maybe 15 minutes. And in 24 hours, you get a text that says, hey, your results are in your online portal, and then you can send them to all of the people that need to see them.
Yes. Good job.
I did it.
Nailed it.
Links
again on our website. You should just go check out our website. That's the whole point.
Under the resources tab,
yes.
Or in the podcast show notes, there are links there. And again, those links will save you $10 and support the show.
Yes. Next week, we have an interview with Maria. We're super excited, as always, about this interview. Come back and check it out. And until then, I thought you were going to say something.
No, you got this. Let's see where you go.
Let's say, until then, come join us on our Q&As tonight. Join us on the meet and greet next week. Come just interact with us. We're excited to hear from you.
Yes.
That's what I was going to say.
All right, you nailed it.
On top of it today.
Yes.
Okay.
And I didn't even have to quiz you about that one.
Bye,
You quizzed yourself right into a corner.
Oh, boy. Yeah. Anyway, bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.